And she says, if you need to leave that home, you can leave. That doesn't mean that's going to stop you from being a father. Hi, my name is Josh Hernandez, and this is my story. I was born and raised in a Christian household. At a very early age, I was being taught about God, taught about Jesus Christ. The church we went to was on Saturdays, and it was an all-day church. As the years rolled on, my father started becoming more and more involved in the church. He became a deacon, and my mother just, she was in the background, just helping him out, helping out the women's Bible studies, anything that she could get involved in. One day, I came home from school. I walked into our house, and I saw my mother sitting in the kitchen. She had tears down her eyes, and I said, what's wrong? What's going on? And she said, it's something about between me and your father, but I need to wait for your brother to get home because I want to talk to you both. Sure enough, when my brother got home, both my parents sat us all down at the kitchen table. Then that's when they announced that they were separating. At that time, I was pretty much destroyed. My whole family was going to be broken apart. My brother, who was, 7 years older than me, he already decided, well, I'm going to move out. So my brother went his own way. Then it was when both my parents went to trial for the divorce that my mother, about 2 days before the court date, she sat me down and she said, hey, just so you know, I need for you to know why we're getting divorced. Basically, she confessed to me that for a good year, my father was having an affair. And he decided, I don't want to be with you anymore. I want to live this new life and start this new life. That alone right there just completely destroyed me once again. But then, basically the twist of the knife was when she said, and we're going to lose our house. After this court date, we have 1 month, we need to get our stuff. Why? And she says, well, you know how I trusted your father with the finances? Well, for a good year, he wasn't paying the mortgage. So we're losing our home. And she grabbed my face and she said, the Lord provided us before, he will do it again. My father came and told me, if you want to come live with me, you can. But it was my mother that I saw that she was just distraught. She was completely just mentally destroyed from all this. It was basically me and my mother supporting each other. I got a job at a nightclub. And it was that time where I got introduced to alcohol. I got introduced to drugs. I got introduced just the definition of partying. And it was there too where I met a girl. We started talking. We started fooling around. And out of that fooling around, it was when I got the message early in the morning one day, my phone went off. She's like, hey, we got to talk. She told me, she's like, I'm pregnant. I said, oh, okay. And she asked me, she's like, do you want to keep it? I said, yeah, I want to keep it. So we decided to, build a relationship. I went home, I told my mother, and I thought I was going to just hear the worst, but she told me, she's like, look, you need to go make it right. You're already sinning in God's eyes by having premarital sex. Well, now you need to make this right. So I ended up moving out of, well, now that would be my mother's home, into an apartment with me and my baby's mother. About her being about 5 months pregnant, she sat me down one day. I was coming home from work. She was sitting at the kitchen table and she says, hey, before you do anything, can you sit down? I want to talk to you. Well, it was far much worse than that. She told me, before this child is born, I need to let you know that there's a good possibility that it's not yours. Whether this child is mine or not, I'm gonna stay in this, because it was 2 other possible fathers. But those men were long gone. She had no communication. She had no idea where they were. So I just knew in my heart, I just can't walk away. I remember one day I called my mom and she asked me, how's everything? How's it going? The normal questions that a mother would ask. And I was telling her, no, everything's fine. Everything's good. Hey, how are you doing? And she immediately said, what's wrong? I couldn't lie to her, so I told her flat out everything. And she says, if you need to leave that home, you can leave. That doesn't mean that's gonna stop you from being a father, but you can't bring in this child into this world in a relationship between you and her that is just completely like night and day. And I left, I packed my stuff up, I just took my clothes. I moved back in with my mother. I think it was like 2 or 3 days after the birth. She was in the hospital, and I brought myself to come visit. And I went in there, she was sleeping, and the baby was right next to her, and she woke up, and we started talking, and she's like, do you want to hold her? I said, yeah, I'll hold her. And I remember holding her for the first time. And even at that point in time, I remembered what I said to her, that even if this child is mine or not, I will still be there. We tried to start another relationship. So at that point in time, I moved back out of my mother's home. We moved back in, got an apartment. It was me, her. She had a son already from a previous relationship. And then it was my daughter. It was us 4. It was a little after when my daughter turned 5 years old that we decided to separate. This wasn't healthy. I personally didn't want what happened in my family's household, with me and my brother witnessing both of our parents just fighting, arguing. I didn't want that to happen to my daughter. I felt it's just best that we just separate. I remember one day, it was my Sunday to go pick up my daughter. I went to go pick her up. I went to go to her apartment. I rang the doorbell, and nobody was answering. She lived like on the 3rd floor. And there was a small window inside the apartment. And I looked inside and I saw everything was empty. And that totally freaked me out. The first thing I did was I called the police. And I said, I want to report a missing persons case. So I was on my way to the police station when my phone rang, and it's my daughter's mother. And I said, are you okay? She said, yeah, I'm fine. I said, oh, thank you, God. I go, I just went to your place. There's no furniture. What's going on? She said, oh, I moved to Minnesota. A completely different state. I'm like, did you not feel that it was important to at least tell me? And she just shrugged it off, and she's like, well, I found somebody that could take care of me, so I went for it. I stepped into another relationship, found someone who was completely different than my daughter's mother. After about 4 months of dating, we got married. And thank the good Lord, the Lord blessed both of us that she found a great paying job here in Texas. We both moved back. We sold the townhome that we were living in, and we both decided to move to Texas. About a couple of years into our marriage, it was beautiful. It was so great. We got a house. We were married for 12 years. And it wasn't until about when we hit the 7th year mark that things just started to just decrease. And I'm saying to myself, here we go again. And I'm thinking at this time, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm the one that's bad in a relationship. Maybe I just don't know how to treat somebody. And I remember at that time, I got a call from my daughter. And I said, hey. And she's crying. And I said, what's wrong? She said, you are what's wrong. Last time I saw my daughter, she was 7. So here's this young little adult yelling at me, just saying, why are you not there? I was lost for words. In my mind and my heart, I knew she was in the right. Because I felt like I wanted to get away from her mother so bad, so much, that I abandoned my own child. And I cried. I said, I'm sorry. And I said, I would like to make this up to you, make this right starting now. When we both hit our 12th year anniversary, me and my wife at the time, that is when we decided to get divorced. We ended up not hating each other. So our divorce was outside of court. We didn't have to go to court. We didn't have to get lawyers. We did everything between ourselves. We divvied up our bank account. We divvied up everything, and we had no problem with that. He said, I don't hate you. Our marriage got broken, but I still love you. And I want nothing but the best for you. Go out and make a great life for yourself and for your daughter. And of course, at that point, I still wasn't turning to God. I was still going my own way. The job that I have, it became remote. So I started working from home. I was like, cool, this is nice. I moved out into my new place with this brand new remote job, January of 2020. Like everything was gone. This is a brand new life that I'm starting. I felt like if my life was in a box and someone took that box, dumped it, threw it back in my face, and said, all right, here you go, start your life all over again. After the pandemic and 2021 everything opened up, you know, I was watching people going out, people going back to their jobs, hanging out with their families. I was still at home because I had no friends. Thank God me and my daughter's relationship was a lot better. The evil one just started whispering and said, well, you need comfort. I'm like, yeah, I do. Well, you ain't got nobody else around. Well, you could get it through drugs. You get it through alcohol. You get it through other things. Became what's called a functional alcoholic. I paid my bills. I had no debt, paid my taxes, but I was an alcoholic and I was a drug addict. And I was just doing all this from the privacy of my home. Why? Because nobody lives with me. Nobody comes visits me. Who's gonna know? My mother, who I talked to, who I still kept in touch with always, she was battling cancer for about 4 years. She's one of those stories where the doctor told her, you only have this amount of time. Well, thank the good Lord, she had 2 more extra years. And I remember one day she called me and she was very, very sick. This was about maybe 3 or 4 weeks before she passed away. And she told me over the phone that you need to get closer to God. At that time, as I was still in sin, I was tiptoeing back and forth because there was still a part of me that was crying out to God. There was still a part of me that knew that this emptiness that I'm trying to fill, this vacancy of my old life being removed from me, I was filling it with sin. When my mother passed away, indeed it was a sad day because I lost my mom. But it was a day that I was scared because the only one that pushed me to God, the only one that was like a magnet that was trying to bring God and bring me together was gone. And once again, I just completely threw myself into sin. I needed that comfort once again, and I knew where to get it. And I just started replaying everything in my head from my childhood to me being a young adult, to my marriage, to my child, to everything. And I just started crying. That was the first time in my life that I experienced weeping. And I just kept saying over and over again, this can't be my life. I can't live like this anymore. And at that moment, I felt that force just surrounded over me. I felt like there was like this vibration going on around me. And I knew, it came to my head, I knew God's angry with me. This day, right now, you need to make a decision. And I felt it in my heart that he showed one path that leads to him. And then there was this other path that all I felt from this path was darkness. I didn't see it. I didn't have no mental image, but I felt that there was this darkness just right there. And I also felt like there was something waiting for me there. And in that moment, it wasn't God. It wasn't me that found God, but it was God that found me. Because that's how it works. He knows where to find us. He knows how to find us. So I grabbed my phone, and like anybody does, when you want to look for something, what do? You Google it. So I started Googling churches near me. And the first church that popped up was like not even 2 blocks away from me. I said, okay, I'll try this church. But then I felt in me, scroll up a little bit. So I scrolled up to the second church. And it was this church called New Beginnings International. and it had a couple of pictures. And the first picture that I clicked on, it was the sign that is outside of the church that is right next to an expressway. And this sign was tore up. It had a little bit like new innings urch, you know? And I used to drive down the highway every weekend to go to the area where I used to go get drugs. But even then, God was already showing me the church that I was going to belong to. He was already showing me that, you know, you will be a part of this one day. And when I was looking out on my phone, I knew, I'm like, oh, this is that church, that sign that I've been seeing. And I felt it in me. That's the one. And this was on a Tuesday, so I said, okay. I looked at, they said they have services on Sunday. I said, okay, this Sunday, I'll go to that church. That first day of church, I walked in, I felt good. And of course, when God wants to give you confirmation with things, he could do it in many ways. That day, that sermon, the title was called Fearless. And he was talking about how through God, you don't have to be afraid of things. You don't have to turn to the world. You don't have to turn to things. And I remember sitting, I was in the back row, and I remember sitting there saying, okay, God, I'm listening. And I left that day feeling great. And I came up to the altar. There was this lovely lady there. She had a big smile. She's like, hi, you know, what's your name? We introduced ourselves. And she said, you know, do you need any prayer? I said, well, I need a lot of prayer. But I also would like to surrender my life and my will to Jesus Christ. And everybody heard me. And I saw so many people smiling, so many people happy. She was like, you're making the best decision of your life. And at that day, I gave my life to him. And I remember going back home, and I felt this peace. For the first time in my life, I felt like I'm making the right decision in my life. It wasn't until about 4 days later, and I noticed that for the past couple of days, I've been sleeping good. And I noticed that I didn't have this craving for drugs, for alcohol, for nothing. I used to have anxiety and fear. It was gone. And I knew that it was him, that it was Jesus Christ. I knew right there, he is the only one, the only thing in this life that can ever satisfy any type of sadness that you have. And he satisfies that by removing that sadness and placing himself beside you. Thank the good Lord, to this day, I have 1 year saved, 1 year serving God, and I am continuing to develop my relationship with him. That is my story. And that story, my story, is not about me, but it is about God. It is about how God has such an ocean of love for us, how much patience he has. My whole life, he was knocking on the door to my heart. And even though I was ignoring him, the knocks got a little bit quieter, but he never left, patiently waiting for me to come home. And when I came home, I felt that embrace by God. And it is in that embrace that I learned that that is where we get peace. It is in his embrace that we are clothed with righteousness and grace. It was at that time that I knew that he had rescued me from living in darkness and bringing me to light. And that light is God. I am so grateful to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for rescuing me out of my old life and bringing me into the brand new life of living with and for him.